This is Larry Fink. Many of you may not know who he is, but he's the CEO slash founder of BlackRock, and I have a very huge bone to pick with them. You see, BlackRock is a very big corporation slash investment firm that controls trillions of dollars every year because they are very big stakeholders in many companies such as Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and other companies you probably have heard of or have around your house. And remember how I said I had a very huge bone to pick with them? Well, the bone that I have to pick with them, signifying the problem or issue, is that BlackRock thinks they can do whatever they want with the trillions of dollars they have. They think they can control the world. And to be quite honest, they can. You know, money is power in modern day, and they have tons of it at their disposal. And the problem here is they think they can get away with it, but that's not always the case. Something needs to happen, and it needs to happen fast, because they can't just keep on getting away with them acting as if they own the world when they don't. Today I will be discussing some causes and effects that derive from the main issue I had mentioned earlier, as well as some solutions. Let's get into it. So first, to start off, as I've painted a picture about BlackRock for you guys, they are currently exploiting different countries under harsh conditions in different ways. And the first cause that I will be discussing would be how they have invested in other companies that deforest Amazon. And the effects of this would be how people who have lived there peacefully for generations all of a sudden need to relocate and deal with all kinds of problems, such as them getting stripped of their basic human rights, losing their homes, and not being able to follow their way of life and tradition as they have before, all due to BlackRock. And well, there's no need for all that, but yet BlackRock continues to get away with it because they have all this money, and they're pretty much just violating the rights of indigenous people in the Amazon and deforesting their home. The second cause would be how BlackRock cares very little for its actions contributing to climate change and environmental shifts by them investing into companies that actually harm the environment, such as Chevron, Total Energies, and Shell, and much more, which are fossil fuel companies. And the effect that this results in is something called greenwashing. Greenwashing is essentially pretty much when a company says, oh, we're investing into all these companies that are green, such as like they're good for the environment, when they're really not. And they're pretty much just washing it away with green, as in like saying they're environmental, but they're not. So they're pretty much falsely advertising to whoever they're telling it to. The third cause from BlackRock would be how they manipulated illegally the coal market in collaboration with a couple of other companies that are as big as BlackRock too. So the outstanding effect would be how the consumers would have to take a toll, and they would end up having to pay larger energy bills, such as like electricity and whatnot. And it got to the point where Attorney General Paxton ended up like having to take them to court, which is not a first, but not surprising either, because I mean, it got to the point where it got really bad, where the government of Texas had to get involved. So yeah. The fourth cause for BlackRock would be how they have purchased up homes, and sometimes they even try to outbid like the regular consumer, because obviously they're BlackRock, so they have tons of money at their disposal, and they end up outbidding them, so they're able to purchase the properties and resell it to regular consumers at a higher price. And the effect that this has is consumers not being able to afford homes, which they should, because I mean, it's a basic human right for people to have somewhere to live. And it's not fair how BlackRock just buys them up and resells it to them, or even rents them sometimes. The last and final cause was how BlackRock was smart enough to make a subsidiary under the name called BlackRock Services Inc., which they thought was really slick, but really it isn't. And they so when they got in trouble for what they did, which I will explain right now in a second, it all got blamed on the subsidiary, but not BlackRock directly, because they're two different entities. And what they ended up doing was they were owners of a debt collecting services, and the effect that it had on consumers was they were getting they were overpaying for whatever they owed, because let's say they would already like pay off their debt or whatever to like a credit card or like a loan. What they would go ahead and do is they would still continue to send like letters and everything to the consumer saying, oh, you haven't paid it, and if you don't pay, then this is gonna ruin your credit score, and just pretty much sending them letters like threatening them that they were gonna take action, when in reality they didn't know anything. And it got to the point where it got really bad, and so many people took this to court here in California, and the federal court had to put a stop to this, to the BlackRock Services Inc., the subsidiary. So now to begin with the solutions. The first solution would be how to deal with BlackRock's many causes and effects. One of them would be, which is one of the biggest ones, for them to be able to deal with the way they invest in environmentally changing companies, and the effects of greenwashing would be how they can do better on hitting their targets of being net zero emissions for like their company. And an example of this working would be green finance. So pretty much green finance is, instead of them investing money into fossil fuel heavy companies, they invest into companies that have initiatives to make the planet like better environmentally, and just like invest into companies that don't pollute or like don't harm the environment. And that's pretty much what green finance is. So the second solution, after thorough research I found, is BlackRock can start advocating for indigenous people's rights. While they do have a policy that kind of highlights that they do care for indigenous people and that they do want to be ethical, it doesn't exactly like highlight it to the point where it's supposed to be highlighted, because they're pretty much trying to like make people understand that they care more about the people that invest into BlackRock and whatnot than the actual indigenous people's rights. An example of a working solution would be a solid, foolproof policy that actually advocates for indigenous people's rights, instead of one that's like kind of shaky and has no foundation really. Last but not least, one of the simplest and probably one of the most effective solutions to something that we have previously discussed before, which was the unaffordable housing problem that BlackRock likes to buy up homes, would be for them to simply stop buying them. And an example would be a more forceful approach would be for Congress to pass a law and prohibit big corporations or investment firms from even buying homes or buying them up in bulk, or like whatever the case may be, and that would give an opportunity to regular families and consumers to buy the homes themselves at a more fair price.